Well, dozens of Hamas terrorists were killed in an IDF ambush in Gaza over the past 24 hours. At least 5 rockets were also launched from northern Gaza at the southern city of Sderot. The IDF is responding firmly with evacuations ordered from civilian areas where rockets were launched. 451 days in the war in Gaza, and it's heating up once again. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Things had been relatively quiet in the Israeli communities bordering Gaza in recent months. The Hamas brigades had all been defeated and rocket fire from Hamas had been reduced to a trickle. Most residents of Sderot had returned to homes evacuated after October 7th of last year. The relative quiet was shattered as at least 5 rockets were launched from northern Gaza at the southern city of Sderot. 2 of the rockets were intercepted and the other 3 fell in open areas. There were no damages or injuries caused. That made 3 days in a row that rockets were fired from Gaza. Amid the renewed rocket fire, the IDF ordered an evacuation of Gazan residents in specified areas. Airstrikes were then ordered in the areas of the launches. In Jabalia, the IDF identified large numbers of armed terrorists trying to flee. Dozens of the gunmen were eliminated. It's a continuation of the operation from Kamal Adwan Hospital over the weekend, during which more than 240 terrorists were arrested. Separately, 14 terrorists were eliminated in a joint IDF and Shin Bet operation. 6 of those killed were terrorists that participated in the October 7th massacre. The Army said that it will continue to operate against every terrorist who participated on October 7th. Meanwhile, the IDF announced the identity of a soldier killed in the ongoing Gaza fighting. Staff Sergeant Yuval Shoham, aged 22, was from Jerusalem and was the 9th graduate of the capital's Himmelfarb High School to die in the war. According to the IDF tally, the death of Shoham raises the toll of soldiers killed on or since October 7th of last year to 824. Some 392 of this number were killed since the start of the military's ground operations in the Gaza Strip on October 27th, 2023.
Well, families of hostages are reacting to the detailed report of severe abuse rescued and released hostages experienced while in Hamas captivity. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is in Hostage Square with the latest. Shosh, what can you tell us?
Well, some families of hostages still in captivity are calling this report chilling, while some families are saying their loved ones are going through, quote, a Holocaust while in captivity. Now, some of these families came together here in Hostage Square to light the Chanukiah as they react to the scathing report that details the traumatic abuse survivors of captivity recall.
זה לא הפתיע אותי. אחרי שנה ו4 חודשים שהם שם, זה לא מפתיע שזה הדוח, ומספיק, נגמר הזמן.
The report comes as no surprise to the grandmother of American-Israeli Idan Alexander. Her grandson has been in captivity for 451 days and was one of the latest hostages seen alive in a Hamas propaganda video.
הזמן שלהם אזל, ואנחנו מצפים שכולם יחזרו, כולם הומניטריים וכולם צריכים לחזור הביתה עכשיו.
The report compiled testimony from the released and rescued hostages from Hamas captivity that details the severe psychological, mental, and physical abuse they endured, from sexual abuse, humiliation, intentional isolation, branding of the body, deprivation of food and water. The report says women, men, and children experienced this type of abuse. The report also says half of the returned hostages say they were deliberately starved during captivity and kept in dark conditions.
מתן והחטופים עוברים שואה בשבי. הם מוחזקים 15 חודשים בידי נאצים שעושים בהם את הנורא מכל.
Doctors who conducted the report say it underscores the urgent need to release all hostages now, putting pressure on the United Nations and global community. The World Health Organization recently condemned Israel for their raid on Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza without mentioning Hamas or the hostages they continue to hold.
קודם כל זה לא מפתיע אותנו. אנחנו מתריעים על זה כבר כמה חודשים, גם יצא דוח מטעם מטה המשפחות, אבל קודם כל זה בוודאי מדאיג את כל המשפחות.
Recently, officials have been optimistic when it comes to these hostage negotiations, although Israel is now blaming Hamas for why a deal has not yet been reached.
Thank you, Shosh, for that analysis. 3 a.m. sirens warning of incoming ballistic missiles in central Israel almost every night the past week. This is the reality for millions of Israelis under fire from the Houthis in Yemen, the same fanatic group, which has been disrupting vital shipping routes in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, choking global trade and harming economies worldwide since 2023. And yet during the Gaza war, we've seen anti-Israel demonstrators in the West cheering for them on campuses. Why? And who are these Houthis? The Houthis are a Shia Muslim extremist group in Yemen, founded in the 1990s and led today by Abdul Malik al-Houthi. They are notorious for their use of child soldiers and child brides, their targeting of civilians, their use of human shields, their executions of LGBTQ, their hostage-taking practices, and their gender apartheid policies against women. This is a group inherently defined by its murderous ideology, its oppressive practices, and its unrelenting thirst for bloodshed. Their flag and official slogan literally states, "Death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews." Backed by the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Houthis have become a deadly proxy in Tehran's campaign of destabilization and occupation throughout the Middle East. The Islamic regime has pumped money, weapons, and resources into Yemen via the Houthis, enabling them to attack not only their neighbors, but also nations far beyond the Middle East, including Israel, the US, and the UK. The Islamic Republic's influence plunged Yemen into a brutal civil war, leading to one of the worst famines in modern history, a famine exacerbated by the Houthis' deliberate use of starvation as a weapon. Thanks to the Ayatollahs in Iran, the Houthis gained unprecedented territory and power, threatening the actual government of Yemen. But since October 7th, the Houthis have shifted focus to destroying the state of Israel, firing an increasing number of drones and ballistic missiles at Israeli civilians, and also attacking U.S., UK, and commercial ships in the Red Sea. Their attacks have not only harmed global economies by disrupting shipping routes, they've killed British and American soldiers. All this in the name of solidarity with Palestinians, while ignorant college students in the West cheer them on. Clearly, the Houthi problem is not just Israel's problem. That's why the US and UK and Israeli forces have all bombed Houthi targets extensively. But even with these strikes, the Houthis have managed to be the last proxy standing. So how does a country defeat the Houthis when even bombing them into the Stone Age may not be effective? After all, they already live there. Like Hezbollah and Hamas, the Houthi leaders must be targeted and Houthi capabilities must be eradicated. But the only lasting solution is to cut off the head of the snake, the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is the regime fueling the Houthis' atrocities, the regime empowering their aggression, and the regime that needs to be confronted. Eliminating the Islamic regime in Iran, along with its proxies, is not just a moral imperative, it's a strategic necessity to restore stability and hope to Yemen, to Iran, and to all the Middle East. Now joining us here in studio to discuss the Houthi terrorist organization is Yemeni peace activist and a prolific content creator himself at Builders of the Middle East, Luay Ahmed. Luay, it's a pleasure to have you here in studio with us. To start, I'd love to get your opinion as a Yemeni of this organization, the Houthis, and their impact on Yemen. Who are these guys?
I mean, they are the most terrorist-like group that Yemen has seen since Al-Qaeda. People don't understand that the Houthis are not only barbaric, they were never democratically elected in Yemen. Hamas, which is also a terrorist group, was at least democratically elected by the Gazans, but the Houthis were never democratically elected. What they did was they grabbed their weapons and they took over the entire Yemeni institution through the ministries and through the streets. So Yemen had no infrastructure before the Houthis came in. So when the Houthis, a terror group which was armed since before 2006, took over on the streets and then institutions, they were able to take over. And the consequences that this has had on Yemen has been detrimental. I mean, even before their takeover in 2014, more than 75% of the Yemeni population was impoverished. So you can only imagine when a terrorist group takes over this very impoverished country, what that will mean, most specifically for the minorities and the women of the country.
Now, the Islamic Republic of Iran is the primary funder of the Houthis, who were not that strong before all of this influence from Iran. What impact has that regime in Iran had on Yemen, on the people of Yemen?
Like you said, they are the head of the snake, and I usually say that they are the octopus. They are the head of the octopus, and the Houthis are just a tentacle that the Islamic regime is using. Now, the Islamic regime in Iran hates Arabs, Muslims, and Yemenis Lebanese. They don't care. They're only using us to further their agenda. And their agenda is Islamic occupation. We see this Islamic occupation in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Gaza. And what they want is exactly what is written in the Houthi slogan: death to America, death to Israel. Now, if that is your slogan, death, there is no way that you're going to be able to create a prosperous society. So they're telling you, we want death. And many Yemenis are upset and tired of this because we see that our own society is being destroyed by this terrorist group. And beyond that, the Houthis are detrimental to the vast majority of Yemenis. Now, you call them a Shia terrorist group, but they also worship the Hashemites of the country. This is a medieval group that has ideas from the Stone Age. So what they do with the idea of Hashemites and this law that they passed that's called Al-Khums is they prioritize the Hashemites. And the Hashemites are people who are related to Prophet Muhammad. This sounds like a crazy, insane idea, but that is because it is an insane terrorist group that takes its laws and rules from the 7th century.
Now, we know that the U.S., U.K., and Israel have all retaliated against Houthi action, and yet we still see them firing ballistic missiles. I know you were even in Israel during one of those attacks.
Right.
What can be done to actually stop the Houthis? Is targeting Yemen effective at all? Should it be targeted towards Iran? What would you advise?
I think this is a very complex issue for Israel and the Israeli society to face. It's not every day that a country is being attacked on 7 different fronts. I do believe that Israel has to defend itself and attack the Houthis, most specifically in their military bases. And these military bases, the weapons that the Houthis are getting from the Islamic regime in Iran, are affecting most of all Yemenis, the journalists that are being executed, the women who are getting killed, the gays who get executed, the people who are critical towards this terrorist regime that is occupying our country. These weapons are being supplied by Iran. So when Israel attacks military bases and destroys these weapons, they're also saving the Yemeni people, not just attacking the Houthis. And this is something that many people in the Middle East don't understand, but they're beginning to realize. When Israel is attacking the Hezbollah through the Pager attack and killing terrorists, basically, killing terrorists in Yemen, this is better for the Middle East. A lot of people think that we should not kill terrorists, we should try to negotiate with them. But Israel has been trying to do that for the longest time, and this is the only option that it has right now, is to attack back and defend itself.
Now, we are almost out of time, but I want to ask you really quickly. You are in Israel, technically an enemy country of Yemen as it stands today.
Right.
How have you been treated? What has been your experience here?
My experience has been miraculous because before I came here, I, like most Yemenis, thought that I was going to be perceived with hatred and racism and judgment, but I've been embraced with so much love and friendship and kindness by the Israeli society. And of course, there's a lot of problems with Israeli society. There's racism, there's misogyny. These issues are in every single country that exists. But the love that I have been shown by Israelis, but just by knowing that I'm from Yemen, they go, "Where are you from?" I tell them I'm from Yemen. They're like, What are you doing here? Are you a Houthi? Which shows you the level of kindness and openness and warmth at the Israeli society. My country is currently not making you sleep. We're throwing missiles at you, but you still are kind and sweet to me. And this is something that I'm trying to communicate with people who don't visit Israel, that the Israeli society is a warm, loving, Middle Eastern society that actually reminds me of Yemenis in the way, when I was on the way from Vienna to Israel, a woman on the airplane actually was making sandwiches and she forced me to eat her sandwiches. This has never happened to me in Europe, but this is something that used to happen to me in Yemen. So that warmth and kindness is something that I really love and admire so much about the Israeli society.
Well, we are glad to have you here, and of course, glad to have you in studio today. Louai Ahmed, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And tonight, ILTV and Ynet News present Lights of Hope, a special 2-hour virtual event featuring the President of Israel. Join us as we light the Hanukkah candles and highlight areas of hope for the year ahead. Catch Lights of Hope on our YouTube channel right after this broadcast. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is recovering after a successful prostate surgery at Hadassah Medical Center. The procedure went smoothly with no complications or cancer concerns, and Netanyahu is expected to remain hospitalized for several days. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has the full story.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is recovering well after undergoing prostate surgery here at Hadassah Medical Center overnight. According to his office this morning, he was awake and fully conscious and feeling well. He was able to be moved to the underground secure recovery unit, where he is expected to stay for the next few days.
Professor Ofer Goffreitz, head of the hospital's urology department, shared an update late last night stating that the surgery went as planned without complications. He said there are no concerns about cancer. Netanyahu is expected to stay hospitalized for several days. During his recovery, Justice Minister Yariv Levin is acting as prime minister, while Defense Minister Israel Katz is handling the security cabinet. The prime minister's office announced the medical procedure on Saturday. The statement explained that Netanyahu had been treated with antibiotics for several days to address a urinary tract infection. Professor Goffreitz performed the surgery alongside Dr. Ehud Nesson, a senior urologist from Shamir Medical Center. He was brought in because of his extensive experience. Goffreitz had previously operated on Netanyahu in 2017 to address a bladder stone.
Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter died at the age of 100. The one-term president is best remembered for having brokered the historic Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt in 1978. He had also been sharply critical of Israel after leaving office. More on the Carter Middle East legacy in this report from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The 39th U.S. President Jimmy Carter secured the Egypt-Israel Peace Accord in 1978 after long negotiations with Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. Carter personally authored 23 drafts of the Camp David Accords and negotiated separately with both sides after it became clear that the longtime enemies could not reach an agreement directly. The deal was concluded at marathon talks at Camp David. After 13 days of intense negotiations, Carter's work at Camp David in 1978 led to the first peace treaty between Israel and an Arab state and radically changed the landscape of the Middle East, diminishing for the first time in Israel's history the threat of regional war. Carter was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 for his decades of work seeking peaceful solutions to international conflicts. Carter grew increasingly critical of Israel in the years after he left the Oval Office, culminating in the 2006 publication of his book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. Carter earned pariah status in some corners of the Jewish community for his criticisms of Israel. In recent years, Carter was often unsparing in his critique of Israeli leaders and settlement policy in Judea and Samaria. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu pointedly did not meet with Carter during the former president's last visit to Israel in 2015.
Well, following the passing of U.S. President Jimmy Carter, joining us is the CEO of NGO Monitor and the author of Menachem Begin and the Israel-Egypt Peace Process Between Ideology and Political Realism. Joining us is Gerald Steinberg. Gerald, thank you so much for being with us. As always, pleasure to have you on. Now, you're an expert on this issue. You've written extensively about Carter's role in the Egypt-Israel peace process, perhaps what he's most known for. We will get into the critiques of Israel, but in terms of how the peace process was impactful, how did this impact his legacy?
Well, it certainly is the crowning achievement of his presidency. He did not have a good presidency. It was the Iranian crisis, it was the hostage crisis that he was unable to resolve, and also the economy that led to his defeat in the 1980 elections, and Carter blamed the Jews for that. But when people look at Carter's legacy, his achievements, the peace treaty between Begin and Sadat, between Israel and Egypt, that was a breakthrough peace treaty. It really changed Israel's strategic position in the Middle East because we have a peace treaty with a most powerful Arab country, Egypt, and it's now lasted for over 45 years. That's extremely important in any kind of an analysis. Carter played an essential role in that. I think perhaps overdone. He certainly played his own orchestra there and got his own entourage to talk about how central he was. Let's not forget that it was Begin and Sadat that really did the hard slogging. Carter brought them together at key moments at Camp David, but there are also some very major crises. Both Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, starting from about June 1977. And then the 6 months before, Yitzhak Rabin, who met with Carter first, said that the meetings with Carter were very difficult. Rabin called his first meeting with Carter a disaster. So the relationship was very difficult throughout that period, and Carter made it more, I'd say, prettified it, made it look much more positive in his version of what happened. But there were lots of tensions all the way through that period, and as Steve Leibowitz and you have pointed out, after his presidency, they became much more open.
Now, as you stated, he became much more critical of Israel later in his life. What do we know about this anti-Israel activity, and do we know why he sort of turned on this issue?
I think he hid it more than he didn't have it when he was president. He acted as a presidential leader, but he was also very angry that his advice, his proposal for a comprehensive peace treaty was not accepted by Prime Minister Begin. He really tried. He tried extremely hard. It was a very hard sell at Camp David the last day to try to get an agreement from Begin to stop any kind of Jewish construction in the Judea and Samaria region or the West Bank. And Prime Minister Begin said, no, absolutely not. That was an essential part of Begin's philosophy, his view of Israel, and also of Israeli security. He said, we came to Camp David to make an agreement with Egypt. We have the agreement. Let's not bring in Arafat on the Palestinian issue. I won't agree to that. Well, Carter then came out and lied and said Begin had agreed to a freeze, an indefinite freeze of construction in Judea and Samaria, and that made Begin very angry. So Carter was very upset, and then subsequently he lost the election in 1980. He blamed the Jewish vote for that, not his incompetence, not his mishandling of Iran and the economy. So I think the elements were there all along, some of them probably theological, connected to his very deep Christian roots. He was not an evangelical, he was a liberal Baptist, and he very much strongly pushed the human rights issue as part of his religious framework, but he then embraced Palestinian victimhood. And that was also part of it. Came out very blatantly. The book, Peace or Apartheid, is a clear evidence of that, but there are many other expressions of that, which is one of the reasons, or the main reason, that Prime Minister Netanyahu refused to meet with him, as did other leaders throughout that period.
All right, well, we are out of time, but thank you, as always, for joining us, Gerald Steinberg of NGO Monitor.
My pleasure, Melanie. Good to talk to you.
Well, the convergence of the holidays this year has resulted in a particularly festive atmosphere in the city of Haifa. Haifa is coming alive every night with a holiday street festival for all faiths. Under a canopy of twinkling Hanukkah menorahs, Christmas trees, and festive New Year lights, Jews, Christians, and Muslims are celebrating the holiday atmosphere together. Residents say that instead of red alerts, there is holiday music and warm wishes. The message, Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. That we wish to all our viewers.